Hey, my name is Molly McCann, and I am doing a lesson over narrative writing. This is geared towards third grade, and this unit is a 4-lesson unit that I have originally written for this, but the lesson that I am submitting for this project is just the first lesson in this unit. And in this lesson, we introduce what narrative writing is and what the story elements are. And so I begin a lesson by asking my kids, what is your favorite story? Because I want them thinking about, like who's in that story that they like, what happens in that story, why do they like it, because they're going to be able to see that those are story elements that are necessary for us to have a good story. So once I get them thinking about that, I introduce how a narrative is in fact simply a story. It can be fiction or nonfiction, but it's not a persuasive kind of writing. It's not really informative. I mean, it can be, but it's told as a story. It can be a description, account of events. It's enjoyable to read. Then we get to talking about characters. We've got to have characters because they are very important to the story and what's going on. So is the setting. They got to have a time and a place. Sometimes they just think about where it's happening. They don't think about what time of day it's happening. So time and place is both very important. And then we get to talking about plot. We got to have a beginning, middle, and end in a story, or else you're kind of lost and you don't know what's going on. So I really want them to understand that we need all three of these things for us to have a good story. And then the standard also talked about temporal words, so like first, after, next, suddenly, all those things in order to transition a story and keep it flowing. And then lastly, we talk about dialogue. Now, dialogue isn't really something that we talk about as much in the first lesson. It's something that we talk more about in the next lesson. But I do, in this first lesson, introduce it so they know why do we need dialogue, why is it important. It helps us, get to know the characters more and understand that, who they are and what they're doing. So after we talk about all of that, we read the story of Goldilocks and Three Pigs, and I have them, or some of my students, act it out. So I read the text and they're acting out what's happening, and it's just fun and it gets them interested. It's just very enjoyable. And then after we act it out, we go back through it and we read the text again. We highlight all the story elements that we can find, and then we put all that in a graphic organizer, a story map, because it was something that they'll be using again later on in the lesson, and I will explain that in just a second. Hey, it's me again. So after we talk about all of the story elements and stuff, I kind of wrap up the lesson by having my students think about all of the things that they have learned in this lesson. So I break them up by their table groups, and I have them discuss with their table group some questions that I've come up with in my think sheet to kind of wrap up their learning. So in my think sheet, I ask some lower order questions as far as Bloom's taxonomy goes, and then I also had them talk about some higher order questions that I've written down. And so some things that I have written for my think sheet are, what is a narrative? Get them talking about that, and then what is the difference between first and third person point of view, which is not something that I'd put in my PowerPoint, but it is something that we talk about in the lesson. I also have my students talk about why it's important to have a clear beginning, middle, and end of a story, and why dialogue needs quotation marks. Like, why do you have to have these special little marks around talking in dialogue? Why do temporal words help to tell a story? Why do we need those? Why are those important? And then at the end of it all, I have them think about kind of like a sequencing type thing, because I think it would help them think about beginning, middle, and end. So I have them think about pretend you're about to eat a bowl of cereal. write sentences describing the steps that you would do to eat that bowl of cereal. So they're using temporal words, and they're thinking about the sequencing as beginning, middle, and end for the plot. Because it's practice, and they'll be using it later on in the lesson or in the unit where they will be writing their own story. After that discussion time, we do individual practice for the exit ticket. And in the exit ticket, they are reading through another narrative text. Earlier, together for the guided practice, we read Goldilocks and Three Bears. But for this one, for individual practice, they're reading The Three Little Pigs. And so, once again, like we did in the guided practice, they got to read through the text. They have to highlight all of the story elements, and then they have to organize those in the story map. And this is kind of what the story map looks like. I drew it out. They have to be able to find all the characters, describe the setting, and describe what the beginning, middle, and ending was. So I have to pick the best detail that they can think of for each part of the plot. So I'm grading them with my rubric based on how well they can highlight each story element. I don't want them to just find characters and setting. I want them to find temporal words. I want them to find an example of dialogue. And they gotta highlight. They can highlight, what they think the best detail was for the beginning, middle, and end for the plot. So it'll be easier for them to put it into the story map. And then I grade them just on how well they put it into the story map. Did they really pick the best detail, or did they just pick some random sentence from random spots in the text? Proficient wise, the most points that you can get for my rubric for this assignment is 20 points. 10 points for finding story elements within a text if you did everything right, and 10 points for organizing story elements in the story map. 10 points for that. If you lacked a few in either of those, you get 5 points, and if you didn't get any of it right, it's 0 points. Pretty simple, pretty easy. And that is my rubric, and that is my lesson. Thank you.